A warm welcome to Business Daily right here on Trust Television. I am Yusuf Akogu. It's indeed a Monday edition. Let's begin with the top business stories. Glad to have you back from the top business stories there in the world of business. Now we go to the stock market to give you highlights of stock trading as it went down on the floor of NGS on Friday. Indeed, the market closed positive. We see impressive performance from the likes of WAPCO, of course, Seplat Assets Holding, boasting the market cap there to 59.5 trillion naira on Friday. We see impressive performance there as it went down on the floor of NGS on Thursday. On Friday, the market went up 0.1%, a marginal gain, but though very significant. Volume of trade 1.040 billion. Volume of shares were traded value at 17.46 billion naira. It is of 7,220 did exchange hands among investors. Of course, when you're looking at the gainers, we see the like of Gold Brew leading the top gainers there on the day. It gained 9.98%, and of course the share price ended 5 naira and 40 kobo per share. There is ended there. Japo Gold 9.30%. It gained there to close at 2 naira and 35 kobo per share. Suno Assurance gained 9.07% to close at 5 naira and 5 kobo per share. There, impressive performance, you say, for these top gainers there on the day. Of course, on the day we had the 27 gainers and indeed 21 losers. Topping that gainers there are these equities I just talked about here. Bottom losers, we have Internal lost 4.62% to close at 22 naira and 70 kobo per share. The Internal play in the oil and gas segment of the market. Sterling Bank Nigeria PLC Tier 2 Bank down 4.12%, and of course the share price ended 4 naira and 65 kobo per share. Of course, Conhop PLC coming from the insurance subsector of the market, 3.85% to close at 2 naira and 50 kobo per share. It ended on the day. Moving on to look at the top trading equities by volume, we have the likes of Wema Bank. Wema Bank lead the table there, 472 million shares it traded on the day. Of course, a very good performance, impressive one, you say, for Wema Bank Nigeria PLC. Fidelity Bank of Of course, there's been a lot of debate whether Fidelity is in tier 1 or it's a tier 1 or a tier 2 bank. 252 million shares it traded on the day. FCMB Group, 45 million volume of shares it traded on Friday as well. There. Moving on, we look at the sectoral performance. It's largely green. We see the banking sector, of course. We saw what happened there with the likes of Wema Bank, Fidelity Bank, and of course FCMB Group. Not forgetting Sterling Bank as well, doing so great there to put the NGS banking index there up by 0.73%. Looking at the industrial sector, of course, not left out there, 0.04%. A marginal gain you will save. The consumer good index is down 0.16%. In fact, the only segment we are seeing in red this morning, of course, that is expected to change. We hope by the close of business today. Oil and gas sector gained 0.17% as usual. It's been gaining on Friday, but mostly from Monday to Thursday, you see profit taking in that segment of the market. Insurance sector is up 0.58% as well. Indeed, impressive performance, you say, across various trading tables on Friday. If you look at the rest of Africa, in Joburg is in red, there's 0.27%. The oil share index 86,938.44 basis points. There, of course, if you go to Ghana, Ghana market was indeed boosted by the impressive showing of the opposition party who Dramani Mahama, who has reclaimed the presidency seat which he lost in 2017. That has indeed impacted the performance of the market. There we see a flawless election in Ghana there. That has given investors some confidence. The market went up there 0.26%, reacting to that performance there. Of course, in Nairobi, it's also in green, 0.81%. The Nairobi market has been on a recovery since the beginning of last week. We saw that ending on the positive note on Friday. We hope that will continue today, as the market is already ongoing on the floor of major markets on the continent. Quickly, we look at the crude oil prices as it's being traded today. Crude oil prices is up as we speak. Of course, the Syrian President al-Bashir regime being hosted there is indeed a kind of introducing greater uncertainty to the Middle East crisis. We see the oil price went up 1.25% today. Of course, it ended 72 naira and 10 kobo per share. They're talking about the Brent, the global benchmark oil price. The OPEC basket is also up as well, 0.60% to close at 72 naira and 37 kobo per share. There we look to see how this changes in the Middle East, and of course, the reaction from Joe Biden will indeed react to the current market segment. But after that oil prices index, there we'll go on a very quick break now. When we come back, we'll go into our discussion segment. Don't go away. To have you back. It's still Business Daily right here on Trust Television. Former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher did say prosperity will not come by inventing more and more lavish public expenditure programs. You do not grow richer by ordering another checkbook from the bank. No nation ever grow more prosperous by taxing its citizens beyond their capacity to pay. That's the words. These are the words of former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher. And of course, the biggest elephant in the room in Nigeria today is a tax reform bills being sent to the National Assembly for consideration by the president. Indeed, a lot of debates, opposition from various interest groups has actually been on the front burner. Of course, there's a lot of suspension for consultation with regards to that. We'll delve into that discussion this morning, and of course, we'll look at the pros and cons of that bill this morning. I have joining me in the studio three gentlemen, two in the studio here, of course, one joining me via Zoom. Aliyu Ilias is an economist. He joins me right here in the studio. Glad to have you, Aliyu.
Thank you for having me.
All right. I also have Dr. Adegboyega Adebajo, is an economist and, of course, an investment banker. He also joins me right here in the studio. Glad to have you on Business Daily.
Thank you,
and, of course, Steve Nwachukwu is the MD CEO, Steward Asset Management Limited. He joins me via Zoom from Abuja here. Good morning, Mr. Steve.
Good morning, my pleasure to be here.
All right, let me quickly get your take, Aliyu, with regards to the tax reform bill. What is your reaction to that bill?
Right, I think the tax reform bill is quite timely, and it's very important at this point in time. I think it has, from the proposal as it were, it comes to solve a lot of problems for an individual, because it talks about income, because people will have more purchasing power if that bill actually scaled through. It also talks about private business people who are suffering from double taxation, a lot of negative impact of tax. I think these are the part of what the tax came to actually solve. But the negative and the challenging part is the political economy part of it, because the interplay between politics and economy, it's a big issue, and mostly politics will always have its way, because you could see the Northerners in particular are saying that we give you 62% of votes, so sometimes you need to consult that. Then the issue now is that there's cautious optimism from Nigerians. And what is it? Because you recall that when first subsidy was removed, it was President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's decision on the day of inauguration. He removed it. When the flotation of Naira actually came about, it was just a decision as well. So some people are having that cautious optimism that, if we allow you to just come and also bring about this reform without proper consultation, it will be as if we take everything from you, Klein, and I think that is the major challenge. But in terms of the reform, it's a good reform.
Indeed, Dr. Adebajo, you listen to Aliyu there. He did talked about the reform is indeed a very good one. But there seems to be a lot of focus on the political aspect of it. Nobody is looking at the economic benefit of this bill.
And that's very sad. But taxation tends to be political. And I'm sure if we all think back to the history of Nigeria, way back in Egba in those days, the women rose up because of taxation, the Aba women's riots. It is only human to resist change. But when you think about the fact that we have taxes in Nigeria currently in 2024 that have been in existence since the colonial time, some since the 50s, and this is why people are driving through certain local governments in the southeast and you're being stopped by local government officials and made to pay tax for radio in your car, because there's still the radio tax. Now, taxation is law and you need to comply with the law. So it's there, and the truth is there is no law that is not subject to amendment. So even if these bills, and we keep saying the tax reform bill, but there are 4 bills together that were sent. So even if these bills are passed into law, at some point in time, they will probably be amended if they're found not to meet the needs of the people. And that's why I like the decision taken by the presidency after the National Economic Council meeting, and the recommendation that it should be looked at again. And the presidency was absolutely right in saying, look, it is the National Assembly's job. They represent the people. They are the ones to engage stakeholder groups, hold public hearings, get feedback, make amendments as they deem fit, and pass the bill. The point is, we need to change the taxes, the tax laws, the way we collect tax, who collects tax in Nigeria. It's time we do that.
Indeed. Let me bring in Mr. Steve Nwachukwu there. Mr. Steve, some people have expressed the view that the proposed VAT rate will increase, of course, will fuel inflation and, of course, lead to more hardship in Nigeria. Do you subscribe to that?
Oh, thank you so much once again. I think let me progress from where the last speaker said that what we should be much concerned is more of the implementation. With the proposed tax, as expects the current economic condition, yes, of course, it thinks towards that. When you raise your VAT from somewhere progressively from somewhere around 7.5% currently to 10 and subsequent to 15, that's about 100% increase. Definitely, it will. Just like the earlier speaker said, it's going to leave more money in the hands of Nigerians. Yes, it's going to leave more money in the hands of Nigeria. On one hand, it's leaving more money in the hands of Nigeria. On the other hand, it's also taking those money. Because if you have to buy that bag of rice at 100,000 naira and you have to pay value tax of 7.5%, that's about 7,500 naira you pay to government. But when you move to 15%, that means you're paying 15,000 for same product, for some service. So the same money that was left in your hands from the point of tax exemptions will also be taken away from you. So I think the general principles of that bill is good. One is to harmonize and make sure that more money are left in the hands of government to execute their fiscal policies and programs. And also, like earlier speaker also said, that it's going to harmonize the multiplicity of the collecting agencies. Some of these very regulatory agencies have turned to tax collectors when they ought to be regulating their agencies. And also issues around this arbitration, which is the main controversial point in this very tax reform bill, where people are saying, well, we need to accommodate the sense of population, accommodate or using the formulas that seems like you think towards that, while others are saying, let's drive growth through this derivation on consumption. Then the argument also from the Northern Bloc, which is also germane, is the assumptive nature of our data, the assumptive nature of this very consumption-driven methodology we want to reach out to. A good number of institutions, a good number of factories, a good number of businesses. Take, for instance, Dangote Cement. It has a plant in Obajana and a headquarter in Lagos. When they make sales, they don't have the remote areas to make adequate data or information that speaks to that very point or point of consumption. For instance, Dangote operates through their cement, they operate a centralized data collection. Once the sales are made, they don't know where the end point is. So when you are talking about consumption tax or consumption-driven VAT, it means that it has to be generated from the point of consumption, not rather from the sales point. Most of institutions, most of the factories rather has a centralized collection point, meaning that the consumption derivation will not be actually calculated based on where these very goods and services are consumed. That's a basic challenge. That is a fact that a good number of these companies, institutions don't have a way of collecting this data to point to where these goods and services are consumed. Like I was trying to make example of Dangote Cement. If they sell their product, one buys it from Obajana or from whatever, it reflects on that purchase. At the end of the day, that cement, a trailer load or 10 trailer load may be destined to be in Jigawa and ended up in Imo. The consumption derivation that should be calculated for Imo has been given to Jigawa, because in their headquarters it reflected Jigawa, but it ended up in Imo State. So such challenges are found. So most of these items that you hear people consume in the northern region, or even the aspect of not even making available or a system that can calculate or collect these very taxations. These are big challenges. Like I said again, the general principles of the bills is okay, and we need to encourage it, but there should be some level of consultation and adjustment. Let it be a win-win for all.
Indeed, Mr. Adegboyega, I saw you nodding your head there too when Mr. Steve was speaking. Do you subscribe to that argument with regards to especially the consumption tax?
Well, I don't want to go into an argument, but I'd rather like to look at the salient aspects of what Steve has said. And so when it comes to what he keeps saying about data, one location, the other location, and the central thing, it points to the fact that we have not applied technology as we ought to. The bill as it stands now and the tax reform we're engaging on is a fantastic opportunity for us to start to apply technology in terms of data collection. And with what he's saying there, it will not matter where the consumption takes place. Yes, VAT is a tax on consumption, but it is collected at the point of sale.
Sure, absolutely.
And that's why sometimes when you travel through airports, you've got duty free, and you cannot buy that good and go back into the country. You know, you need to pay tax at the point of sale and consume it outside your country. Maybe we might get there at some point in time, but initially we need to start applying technology to be able to understand at what location was this sale made. And for certain technology experts who I've been talking to, this is just the right time for digital transformation in the tax collection center. It's the best time to bring in the informal sector into the tax net. We know a lot of informal traders who right now, because of the fintech companies, have been able to put themselves onto a database. And that presents a fantastic opportunity. But I must point out here quickly that the majority of them are actually exempted from taxation based on the new clauses in the tax reform bill. And they mostly consume items that have also been removed from the VAT list. So again, that's one thing the VAT system does. Let's know who you are. So if you are exempted from VAT, we will note what exemption volumes are being consumed on a year-to-year basis. He also mentioned about the progression of VAT, which is there in the bill, adamant. I would think, and this is one of the reasons why we say the implementation must be rather nuanced. The government probably has projected a certain level of growth or pace of growth, and that is why they have put increases in VAT in the bill. I would rather, if I could, suggest that we need to index that and wait and see whether we attain those growth targets. There are laws and they can be amended. At the appropriate time, when we get to that level of growth, VAT can be increased. Otherwise, it stands the chance of discouraging consumption of certain things. I did read an article about how the cost of living is affecting December in Lagos, as it was said, and someone having to go somewhere and a cocktail drink costs about 10,000 naira. And so if you buy a cocktail drink at 10,000 naira without a meal, you're going to pay tax at 7.5, you're going to pay sales tax or service charge at 10. That's 17.5%, almost 1/5 of the cost of what you're buying as tax. And if this increase in a few years' time later, we can only imagine what it's going to do to inflation. So there is a need to see what's happening with growth, how stable are prices, and how people have accommodated the increases before we make it progressive and actually implement an increase.
Indeed. Mr. Aliyu, you talked about your position with regards to the bill the other time. I was thinking, do you think this bill will in any way will affect any part of the country? Will any part of the country to some extent be at a disadvantage should this bill scale through?
Right. I rather said it's to challenge every part of the country to actually do, and it's gladding that virtually every Nigerians or every government is looking into this bill and what actually comes out of it. Because if you look at even some entity itself, they collect some percentage of the VAT already. To actually, so a state like Borno collect 3% of the VAT, and now we want to change the dimension, and so it's normal for them to be interested. But as it were, we have some states that ordinarily headquarters are situated in their places. So and they are advantage no matter how we look at it from, because it simply means a lot of activities that tax will come into is happening in their state. And when it's like that, other states who is actually consuming, like the example of Dangote cement. If you look at Dangote cement, I think the cement contributed more to the VAT. And if you look at the consumption of it, you look at it where it is actually being produced, or where the headquarters is situated, does not actually consume compared to other places. So it's ideal that every city will look at what actually benefits them. And you recall that most people think is northern issue. I recall that Governor Seyi Makinde actually came out during that period. He was one that actually spoke about the challenge, because as close as Lagos is to Oyo State,
yes,
Lagos take advantage of more of those things compared to Oyo. So, and that's why we need to look at that consumption vis-a-vis also the derivation. So consumption is what concerns most people more, because it can be, your headquarters can be anywhere. Perhaps most headquarters only do paperwork. The operation itself happens, in other states, and that's why they must be concerned about. So I don't think, for the way it is, it's going to be a win-win. But my challenge now is this: why do most people enjoy condemning without proposing? So I think those governors should come together. Those governors should also come together, or even even an individual to come out and bring about a solution. I recall there was a debate, a discussion rather, on it. A governor governor of Nasarawa State, and he was saying that what the chairman of tax force, Taiwo Oyedele, was saying on that program was not what he discussed with them at the point of when he came to their state. So there's need for much more engagement. There's not anything bad in a particular section or a state asking for more clarification or to cover it. It is called politics. So, and the way you see tax, once we agree on it now, like he rightly said, there's going to be an amendment. But what to bring about the amendment? We must start at this point in time to look at it. And it's a good one that the now said Minister of Justice should look at. I think they try to buy time to see how to consult and get more buy-in into the bill, as it were.
But even as we wait for the consultation as well, we should also know that the bill has already scaled through the second reading. It was meant to go for the committee for public hearing before it was indeed put on
second
hold.
reading is not the major issue in bills. It is that public hearing itself.
Yes.
And that's why I think it should be more robust, and most Nigerians are interested in going down that area, because if we have that argument clearly at that point, because I can tell you, even the northerners we are saying there are against, most northerners came out. I can even mention Jubri, who said it's a good bill, but the only thing is that more education on it, more sensitization on it, and bring stakeholder into, because what is playing out is not, they are not looking at the economy of it, they are looking at what the political side of it. They want to hold some people by the jugular about the bill. That's what is happening. And President Bola Tinubu actually understood. So I think he should move closer to them and convince them the more.
All right. Mr. Steve, there seems to be a lot of focus, especially from governors opposing the bills. There are more, many of them are so focused on derivation, not looking at the overall benefit of the reforms on the larger economy.
Okay, yes, of course, they should. There should be some level of focus or concerns about the derivation, because derivation has been moved, the percentage from 20% to 60%. That's quite a loop. So that's why they are raising their concerns. I think first, let's take these issues in perspective. I like the submissions of your guest in the House. I think we are all in the same picture. the general principles of the bill is fantastic, it's good, we need it, but we all agree that we need to adjust, just like Dr. Abo talked about the progressive nature of the tax, the value-added tax. If we can rather suggest, instead of going to 10% to 15%, can't we do 100 basis points from 7.5% to 8.5% or mass 9% than moving to 10 and 15? And we should not discuss this issue of the tax bill in isolation of the general living condition, general realities Nigerians are passing through. You and I knows what the cost of living is now. We are talking about tax. You and I understands the cost of doing business, the cost of production, and the rest, which is exacerbating the current economic conditions. So we should not take those very beautiful components of this very tax bill in isolation of these realities. That's why we are calling, and we still keep asking government and those in concerns to perhaps adjust most of these numbers so that it can reflect and be a kind of relief for Nigerians. Then issue of exemption. While I understand with the plight of those who are crying on the exemption aspect of it, if you take the larger or the payroll of some of these northern states and some in the southern states, 80 to 75% of their payroll encashment falls under these very exemptions. So it's assumed that you have taken away their tax income, their personal income tax or payee tax. 70 to 80% of their catchment. In fact, if you go to some states like in Zamfara, they don't have up to 15% senior civil servants. The rest of them are in the low cadre civil servant who earned their threshold falls under this very recommendation of this tax reform. So I think these are the areas this very bill needs to also adjust, maybe lower this very exemption so that you can have more people that can pay tax. Yes, it's good to leave more money in the hands of Nigerians or more hands in the hands of workers. You also need to make sure that you guarantee income from the internal generated revenue of the government. Yes, this is time to be innovative. It's not all about taxes. It's not all about income from income taxes. We should also look at other sources to earn more revenue for the government. So the exemption threshold needs to be looked at. Then also the exemption on the businesses. In fact, it's somehow, to me, is a hypocritical statement to say 50 million. When you know that in the last 2-3 years, Naira has been devalued more than 300 to 400%. It simply means that goods and services that worth 10 million 2 years ago is worth more than 60 million. So it's more making mockery of the new threshold of 50 million exemptions. So I think we need to be realistic, understand that the cost effects of devaluation in our economy, and put those things all in perspective to understand, yes, Nigerians are groaning, the little cash available with them cannot purchase, and you are still thinking of, one, increasing the VAT, two, also exempting from that very payroll pool of some of these states that pay. In fact, the only people that can attest or that can be granted, that can be said in this nation that pay tax are civil servants. Then when you exempt a good percentage of this number of people, it means some states will be left with little or no tax revenue from their citizens. So, like I said, like the guest in the studio also agreed to this fact that we need to think out with these numbers, maybe lift those thresholds to somewhere reasonable enough to bring more people into the tax net. It's important we make this very tax reform be a win-win. Yes, we understand that government need money, but government should not have this culture of money-centric. All they are looking for is money. Money, money, money. They should also come up with policies that should give to the people, not only give to the people, make it more easier for Nigerians to operate and to survive in the system. Thank you.
Mr. Steve, still staying with you there. In 2019, there was an attempt by the former government under the same party to indeed, implement the same policies and program, but there was an opposition to that from those who were then outside of government at the time. What do you think has changed between then and now?
Well, I wouldn't say things that, rather what have changed is that we even have an exacerbated economic condition. In 2019, we are far better. A bag of rice was selling around maybe 35 to 40,000, but now it's around 100,000. So that's why we should be sensitive to the living conditions of Nigeria. Like I said, let us not discuss this matter or the tax bill as fantastic all the principles of the bills are, to increase government revenue, to block all the cut off all the linkages of revenue, to encourage productivity through consumptive derivation principle, and to abolish this very feeding bottle federalism that we've been practicing. Yes, like I said, the general principles of these bills is fantastic, but like you asked, 2019 and now we far better. The living condition is becoming more expensive or much harder for businesses to strive. So these are things that we should put in perspective while we encourage this bill. Yes, it should have a human face. That is all I'm saying. This bill should have a human face. If you have to increase your VAT or value added tax, please don't jump from 7.5% to 15% in the next 3-4 years. Rather, incrementally, maybe 100 basis points from 7.5% to 8.5% or 9%. Don't just go to 15%. It's not realistic. Nigerians are already suffering. I started an example. If you're buying a bag of rice at 100,000 naira, and you were buying it in 2019 at 40,000. Now, if this bill passes through and we start paying maybe 10% or 15%, it simply means you are giving more money to government.
All right, Mr. Steve. Let me come back to the studio. Mr. Adebajo, he is so more concerned about the VAT, the increase in VAT. Yeah. Of course, it's part of IMF prescription.
Yeah. So I'll repeat what I said earlier. For me, I'm not even going to suggest numbers by which it should increase. I think the decision of the amount of increase in VAT at any point in time should be data-driven. It should be based on economic growth and the fact that there is affordability for those items on which VAT is going to be imposed. It's as simple as that. And I think, therefore, we shouldn't project these increases in a bill as of now. It's always possible to come back and amend the law as appropriate. And I ask myself, if the bill were to pass today, and remember, there are 4 bills. You know, we're concentrating so much on the rates.
The controversies.
The key thing is, first of all, and I think you spoke to it, Yusuf, we're going to have to change the collector. And therefore, all those regulatory agencies stop collecting tax, focus on what your mandate is, and have a single agency. When this is done, data is located at a central point. It's a lot easier to apply the technology. It's a lot easier to analyze the data. And the key thing here is that for a lot of people who are below a certain economic threshold, they will stop paying tax. They will be better off. As for what it is worth, SMEs will be better off. Steve is absolutely right in terms of what he says about the 50 million turnover. But let's remember that a lot of these companies have actually had reductions in volume at which they sell. Just as prices have increased, people have bought less. So 50 million can still be a target that's difficult to attain for some of them right now. We should also bear in mind that one of the changes that's significant in the tax bill is so much so that the derivation aspects. So no one's going to look at headquarters anymore for VAT. They're going to look at VAT where the consumption takes place. And I think this then throws an important strategic imperative to governors and governments. And remember, Yusuf and I, we've always spoken, or I've always spoken about this with you, that I think states need to sit down and be strategic. What do we have? How can we raise money here? What can we create? The northern states have a peculiar problem. It's not peculiar to the north. I'll probably say the same thing about the southeast, because you have Mondays entirely without any economic activity. Banks don't even open. aircraft do not want to land at the airports. The North is faced with insecurity. I'd love to visit a lot of places in the North. It's a long time since I've been to Maiduguri. There are beautiful places in Sokoto. There are fantastic places in Kebbi. I've done the drive from Bauchi to Gombe and back, and all I could do was drive past Yankari without stopping at the game reserve. There are lots of beautiful things that can happen, but insecurity is a problem. And so it is time for the state government to work hand in hand with those who are concerned to stop it. Because until and unless you can have that degree of an enabling environment for businesses to thrive, it will not thrive. In the course of my work with entrepreneurs and startups, I've had cause, and that's why I've traveled to the States, I've traveled to meet a lot of young entrepreneurs in the North. Fantastic ideas, solving significant problems in there. But they have two very, very important problems: financial access to finance and market access. And these things are endangered because of the insecurity. But taxation is not going to wait for insecurity to be resolved. It needs to be put in place. And then the people need to say, this is an opportunity for us. Let us remove the challenges that's going to make it possible for us to grow. And that's the way I see it. Thank you very much.
Indeed. Let me bring in Mr. Liu. Mr. Liu, there is also some people have said that if the tax bill did go through, it's going to be like an opportunity for governors to begin to create a lot of economic activities in their state.
What the fact is, I don't think there is governor. Well, the thing is, more governors need to be challenged. We must stop feeding bottles, so to say, federalism. They must find a way to source, because let's look at Governor Mba of Enugu State. How is he doing it? He's even paying internal debt. You know, you need to see his budgetary plan and what have you. How is he doing it? That means he understood the opportunity there in the state. So every state must start to look inward to what they are going to look into. Perhaps every state have one natural resources or the other. It's time for us to tap it, because once you tap it, you also have the benefit of derivation. You get something from it. So we must actually generally, not even issue of taxation that comes in, generally our IGR per state need to increase, because you cannot continue to rely on the federal allocation to actually survive your people. And that's why when you have little problem in terms of oil or what have you, it's going to affect virtually everything. So I think it's a general challenge, not even because of tax. However, if you have enabling environment in your state, people will come to invest. There is statistics that said FDI could only attract maybe little. Is it about 32 miss out of FDI investment? That's a serious problem. That means you are not attracting the right investment. And how do you attract the right investment? It's for you to start with infrastructure that will engender people to decide to come and invest. Just like the issue of electricity now. Most states have started passing it to be. And I was telling in one of my interviews that no investors will come to your state and start investing in electricity right from scratch. As a state, you must take it to a pedestal that they will now come, because it's a huge investment. So I think the state need to do more beyond the issue of even taxation.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much, Aliyu, because it just struck me, came back to me as he was talking. Kano is not bothered about this. Kano is ready to go with the tax bill. Kaduna is ready. Kano, it comes naturally to Kano because of the resources they have in terms of population, in terms of the fact that for over 100 years, Kano has had a fantastic Sahel region market in Gezawa. So trade happens. Kaduna, El-Rufai did a fantastic job in Kaduna previously. They're ready to deal and to move on, and they can raise their revenue. These are places where thinking...
These are viable states.
Yes, where thinking goes and where it can happen. And when we think about it, what you just said, the federal government has said, look, states, you can start generating your own electricity. You can have your electricity board. That is a simple way, with the amount of sunlight in the north, to start building solar farms. There are even ways in which, without investors actually being there, you can provide some degree of assurance or recourse. Put those solar farms in place and channel electricity 24/7 to those who you know you can charge a certain amount, and charge VAT on the electricity. And charge other taxes for usage. So there are things that it just needs thinking. The potential is significant.
Indeed. Let me quickly get your final take before I go to Mr. Steve there. Mr. Steve did talk about the business with less than 50 million naira turnover enjoying some tax exemption. What happened if they decided to take advantage of the VAT increase and, of course, increase their own prices in order to make profit?
You know, currently VAT hasn't increased, and the increase is progressive. But one thing is clear, there is no VAT is added on and it's paid by the consumer. So whether or not they increase their prices, the VAT rates will be charged on their price. What will happen is they need to be mindful. I did use an example of 17.5, but in some places you've got the 10% service charge, a 5% sales tax, and 7.5% for VAT. So if you go to certain restaurants, you could be paying as much as 22.5% in taxes based on the price. So for consumers, for businesses, they need to be mindful of what their all-in charges are.
All right. Mr. Lee, we want to react to the same
Right.
question.
You know, Steve actually made mention that when you say PIT, personal income tax, when you say, okay, we overlook it to maybe when you are earning 800,000, but in the long run, they still pay it when they are actually embarking on consumption. And because of that, we want to canvas further that I think that 800,000 is too small because it is after removal of pension, right? So they should move it maybe to 1.2 or 1.5 so that people can have that buoyancy.
All right, Mr. Steve, let me get your final take with regards to this issue. We talked about businesses who may want to take advantage of the VAT reduction, of course, to raise their profit for their products.
Yeah, quite a very insightful discussion. I listened to your guests, quite a good submissions, and I think, like I keep emphasizing, let's not just do the talking and leave to have some level of reality check on them. Like I emphasize, the question is infrastructure. We have lack of infrastructure to capture these very numbers that needs to reflect. A state cannot, have the derivation tax except the numbers favors them. And if we don't have an existing infrastructures to make sure that these states or the reflection of the consumptions are very real, what's actually the stimulation, some of the stimulation available is a data coming from the NBS, that is the National Bureau of Statistics, which are all assumptive. They are not real data. The real data should come rather from the institutions that makes the sales. So that's why we have challenge, like I earlier stated. Then the issue of the exemptions are there. A good number of these very food items. I hope we all know that a good number of food items has been exempted and nothing is left now to be charged. That is also a concern of these very northern governors that we have few things to charge for. And the sort of advice to those who are against or who are saying this tax is not good for them. The northern, now they should look inwards beyond those recommendations that my guest in this state. They also should make sure that institutions and supermarkets, marketplaces insist on VAT, because what happens is that most of these northern markets do not charge it VAT. Most of the businesses totally ignore issue of VAT. They don't. So the government of this state should start insisting that data capturing in the VAT should be insisted when any purchase is made.
All right, Mr. Steve, there, of course, a very good submission there. State governors across the country should begin to look inward, of course, and see how they can make more money from the economic activities within the states. MD CEO, Steward Asset Management Limited, Steve Nwachukwu, thank you for your time. I'm back in the studio here. Aliyu Ilias, an economist. I must thank you for your contributions as well. And of course, Dr. Adegboyega Adebajo, economist, investment banker. Thank you for your contribution.
Thank you.
Of course, this conversation will continue until we are able to get it right. And that's a wrap on the Business Daily for today. Join us again tomorrow. I am